But before that, anybody not know what Cape Hope is? How about everyone who does know what Cape Hope is, will you raise your hand? All right, we don't have to go through a long explanation of what that is. But I started covering this as a weekly newspaper reporter. Went to freeholder meetings, and Denise and other people were coming to the meetings. And I arranged to have an interview with Denise. And now we're married. Yeah. The interview continues. Okay. But anyway, Denise has been the director for almost the past 40 years now, and she has a few words she'd like to say.
I'm too loud. I'm just overwhelmed. I thank all of you for coming. Thank you. Welcome to the first homeless seminar organized by Cape Hope. Our appreciation goes out to the Seashore Community Church of the Nazarene for hosting the event. I can't even begin to thank you for your hospitality. God bless you. To our keynote speaker, who traveled in the rain and the wind, and I'm sure left other important meetings to be here, doing a beautiful life. Thank you so much. We do lift up First Deal to the Lord and pray that He heals from pneumonia, and also Mr. Rogers from the Cherry Street Mission, who tried earnestly to be here but was unable. But both missions are on the websites, so you are able to look into their mission more if you visit their website. And hopefully our second seminar, which will be next year, we will be able to host them. And to everyone who's taken the time to be here, we thank you. Homelessness does exist in Cape May County. It does. We cannot deny it. We cannot turn our blind eye to it. It is here. As much as we would wish it did not exist, it does. And it's a homegrown problem. This is not to say that we don't have a transient population that adds to the homeless population that exists. Often we see people who leave the area for one reason or another, only to return, only to find that it's difficult to manage on low wages and high rents. During the last cold blue season, one of the individuals had left Cape May County to help out his daughter who lived in another state, only to return to a very problematic home life. He left because he didn't want to be involved in the drugs and the violence that was going on in the home. But he left to homelessness. Quite often at the warming center, which Cape Hope operated last year at the Cape Community Church in Burley, we would hear from people who were leaving bad situations like that. And often we heard they left before it became worse. There were a couple of guys who talked about recently being released from prison, moving back in with a girlfriend or a family member, only having to leave because they found that the circumstances changed. They opted to leave instead of allowing the problems to escalate and possibly cause them to re-enter the legal system. We've talked to numerous women who have fled domestic violence situations, only to find out that friends couldn't help them. Their promises were empty. Thank you, ladies, for coming and joining us. And they soon became homeless. Some were even assaulted, raped, financially exploited at the hopes of a bed. We even spoke to individuals who worked seasonally and were trying to scrape by in the winter, staying in Cape May County, living outside as a way to get by. Were there addiction issues? Yes. But whereas most assume addiction causes homelessness, homelessness can cause someone to become addicted, or to abuse alcohol, or even lead to mental illness. We spoke to a woman who moved to Cape May County 26 years ago after being sexually abused by her father between the ages of 5 and 15. When she finally made the decision to leave and fend for herself, she got involved in illegal drug use. But what chance did she really have, growing up the way she did? She knew nothing else. For her to survive was on the street, on the corner, hustling whatever way, for a buck, for a meal, for a bed, to avoid a beating if she didn't bring home the money. These are real life situations. The course of becoming homeless was often predetermined for some people, many years before it happened, such as with this woman. And now there's the homeless children. Under the McKinney-Vento Act, which is a whole population that is very much unknown, very much unspoken, but yet very much a reality in Cape May County. McKinney-Vento was a law that was enacted by President Reagan to help families that were at risk of becoming homeless or homeless that had children. The definition of McKinney-Vento is if a child is living in a place that is not their own. And the statistics are all up on the website, National Alliance for the Homeless, if you'd like to look at them, from all the counties, Cape May and New Jersey and all over the country. So a recent radio news program mentioned that homeless children, even those who have temporary shelter, at the home of a family member, a friend, or a relative, will suffer academically. The lack of achievement follows them into the workforce, where they will likewise suffer. Some perhaps will only grow up to fill the new jail, just built miles up the road. Some, by the grace of God and help from others in their community, will recover to live somewhat normal lives. So to quote the National Alliance to End Homelessness, poverty is a major cause of homelessness. After a 50-year war on poverty, the evidence is in. Work, personal responsibility, and a healthy economy are fundamental to individual and family well-being and to provide the best pathway out of poverty. Individuals must supply the personal responsibility, yes, this is true. But the availability of work to earn a living wage and then to find affordable housing is something beyond the reach of over 500,000 Americans today. Elected leaders have the responsibility to offer every American the chance to realize the dream of freedom and economic independence, contrary to other false notions. That people want to be homeless. No one wants to be homeless. No one wants to live out on the street. They just don't know how to change. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the 1964 recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, said, "There is nothing new about poverty." Even Jesus reminded us that we will always have the poor with us. But today, we know that we have the resources to get rid of it. And in the words of the Apostle John, if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and does not give from what they have, the love of God does not abide in them. I encourage you all to not let God find us without his love in us. How do we then as individuals, as churches and community and government respond to the needs of those who are homeless, needing services such as employment, medical, mental health services, and education or job training? It begins with giving them a place to live. How do you solve homelessness? You give somebody a home. Problem solved. Bing. Even for a short period of time. What we know as transitional housing can exist for anywhere from up to 6 months to 2 years, while the individual perhaps who is a head of the household, single parent or individual, works towards becoming self-sufficient, a productive member of a community. From the time rescue missions emerged on the scene until now, both Republican and Democratic administrations have taken turns developing and delivering solutions to social goals. At the same time, faith-based organizations have been carrying on this life-saving ministry. Why? Because we have nothing else to do? No. Because it's born out of a deep conviction to show the love of God. The perspective says faith-based efforts in local governments enjoy a healthy synergy, working together. It's our greatest need as we work towards getting people off the street. Continuing, it says an increasingly diverse county needs a multi-pronged approach to alleviating homelessness. And one of those prongs has been and must continue to be the faith-based community working along our county, agencies, officials, organizations, from the hospital, from social services. Continuing, we at Cape Hope agree that homelessness should be rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. We believe, as the perspective says, our communities must act quicker, more comprehensively, and more collaboratively to shorten and lessen the crisis. Yes, the crisis. Homelessness has become a crisis. When I answer the phone and there's a young lady on the other end who was just raped because she was sleeping under the boardwalk, that's a crisis. We believe that the most effective plan for reducing homelessness must address the cause and not simply treat the symptoms. We believe that a county government with an office of faith-based and neighborhood partnerships must truly and fully be opened to working together. Will we continue to ignore the plight of the homeless in Cape May County? Or will we, the faith-based community and local government, partner to treat the homelessness that exists in our community? We are proposing that we are at the crossroads of this epidemic. And one way leads to increased recognition of the problem and an increased willingness to take our efforts to a higher level. That's what we're here for today, taking it to the next level rather than just treating the problem. I'd just like to say something, and some of you know that I've been doing this for a few years, and I tried to walk away, but I can't. And I can't because my faith is in God. He's put this burden on my heart, and for no other reason. What he's going to do with this is fix it in his way. And I have to apologize because I have always run on the strength, my strength, and the strength of others. God bless the board of Cape Hope that we've tolerated me this long. But I have to truly apologize because it is not the power of man that will accomplish this. The Bible says that we have this treasure in earthen vessels. that it is not going to be by the power of man, but by the excellence of God. So if we have any doubt that this is going to happen, I would suggest you leave your doubt at the door, because it's going to happen. And I have come up against a lot of resistance with people, mentioning that, well, why do we do this? People are drug addicted. People, they want to be homeless. People, they don't want to do. People, they don't want to do all this, yada, yada. And I'm like, yeah, we all make mistakes. But if we remember, if we just put one lens in front of our eyes, that we were all, the word all, created in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. And then he goes on to say, all were created in his image. We are the image bearers of God. Not only those who are sitting here today, but all those who are out there, still sleeping in the woods, still struggling, children still sleeping on couches. We're all created in the image of God. And I hope that encourages you to step out and to do what needs to be done. So I also wanted just to thank my friend Alfred DeFeo. He's actually he's our neighbor county, Cumberland County, and he's going to also be sharing with us his wonderful ministry, and he's brought some lovely young ladies who are brave and bold, and I can't wait to work with them. And he's going to be speaking after Jeremy. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Jeremy. This was challenging. Here you go.
Pardon me for a second while I become Britney Spears here. Right. How's that? Does that make me look like a rock star? It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming out. I have to tell you, the daily work that I get the privilege of doing anytime in an evening I can come out and be with a room full of people who care. It inspires me. It really propels me. So I'm really honored to be here. Again, in Philadelphia, Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission, share about that a little bit. So listen, I'm going to bring you through a little journey. First of all, we already heard a little bit about the homeless, but we're going to start off tonight first talking about who are the homeless. Do have some stats regarding Cape May County, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we work with the homeless and some lessons that we've begun to learn, particularly in the last decade or so, especially lessons learned amongst faith-based organizations like a gospel rescue mission like I work for. And then lastly, I've been asked to then touch upon next steps. What does next steps look like for a group like this? What could be possible for you as a community coming together to be able to focus on? Okay, can we do that? So a little bit about who I am to start off. Again, my name is Jeremy Montgomery. I've been in ministry my entire life. I have 2 master's degrees, one from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary in urban ministry, which is up in Boston. I also have an MBA from Eastern University. I've really devoted my life to the work that I get to do. My first ministry was doing gang intervention in the Boston public schools. I had a community block grant, which was a public grant to work with the police department to be able to mobilize clergy in gang-related incidents in the Boston public schools. Went on there, I had 7 years of pastoral ministry in Westfield, New Jersey, which, if you know Westfield, there's no gangs in Westfield. But next to that would be Plainfield and Newark. So I had the privilege of working with a church that wanted to be more intentional in those communities. And then for 8 years, I have been an executive, or was an executive at Habitat for Humanity, a lot of public private partnerships there. So 7 years was in Plainfield, New Jersey, and then most recently was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which this weather is going to be really cold for me. Winters. But also with me, and as you know, I'm now President and CEO of Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission. Who is with me tonight too is Erin Linden. Thank you. I appreciate that. Not only is she really the homeless expert for us as Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission, she's also my lovely wife. And even as it's already been mentioned in terms of public-private partnerships, the role that I play in nonprofits, frankly, she comes from the public side. So before we got married, for almost 9 years, she led the continuing care for a county in Michigan, Livingston County. She worked for a community action agency. She was the sole system administrator for HMIS. I'm sure the mayor here knows about HMIS, hopefully, or it's the equivalent of a system within the county and the state to be able to monitor the homeless. And then she herself wrote all the grants and administered 19 different programs for the entire county for homeless programs in Livingston County, total almost 1.2 million. And now, of course, when I took the position at Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission, I only know of one homeless expert, so I had to hire my wife as the Director of Homeless Services. Well, thank you very much, even though, yes, that's nepotism. So I would like to learn a little bit about who you are. I didn't know that there was going to be so many of you, so my original plan was to say, hey, show of hands, you know, or actually I was going to go in the room and say, hey, stand up, introduce yourself. For the sake of time, we're going to skip that. Is that cool? Real quick, show of hands, how many of you are from this church? Okay. Now, show of hands, how many are from a church? You're here because you basically are here because of your church. All right. Show of hands, how many of you work in a nonprofit that works with the homeless or in social service? Okay, good. Show of hands, how many of you are an elected official? Oh, several. Yeah, could you real quick stand up and introduce yourself before we have the mayor here, please? Sure. Not to put them on the spot, but they're used to it, right?
Yeah.
Mayor Chuck Lear, from the city of Cape May.
Awesome, great.
Freeholder, Maureen Hayes, Cape May County, and I have to say something. Denise, I never knew that our meetings were that exciting. It's like a dating place. You come to a freeholder meeting, how cool is that?
Good to know. We'll have the speed dating later. Yeah. There's another hand at the table. Awesome.
Jerry Martin, Freeholder Director for Cape May County.
Over here. Oh, you're skipping now? Changed your mind? They voted you out while we were looking. Awesome. And then show of hands, how many of you are concerned, compassionate citizens? Okay, I'm glad that every hand was raised on that one. So tonight, listen, this is what we're going to do. If you have questions tonight, we're going to go a little high-tech. Yes, this is my lovely wife's cell phone number. If you have a question, text it to her, okay? We're going to monitor and check into with her every now and then. If you don't know how to text, God bless America. Grab a pen and a piece of paper in front of you. You can write down your question and walk them up to her. We're going to try to get those throughout the evening. A little bit about Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission. We are the second rescue mission, oldest rescue mission in the United States. We were founded in 1878, and if you're from Philadelphia, we were founded by John Wanamaker, John Stetson, as the cowboy hats, Atlee Burpee of Burpee Seed Company, and Gunter Powell, which was the first U.S. postmaster. In 1878, those four Christian businessmen saw the need of the homeless in Philadelphia, and they said we should offer coffee and a donut before church. In the second meeting, they had 400 homeless men show up, and we were immediately founded as Sunday Breakfast Association. Today, we do more than Sunday Breakfast, though our heritage, of course, carries the name. Today, we are the Philadelphia's largest homeless emergency shelter for men, directly downtown in Center City. So we have accommodations for about 250 men, and on Blue we accommodate up to an additional 150. So heading into the winter, we could have up to 400 homeless men in our facility. We're also Philadelphia's only provider of 3 meals a day, 365 days of the year, period. We're the only provider of 3 meals a day. And so throughout the year, we serve alone as a rescue mission about a third of all of the homeless community in Philadelphia, particularly men. And we do that all with no government support. So 100% of our funding comes from good old-fashioned direct mail. We have about 18,000 donors that give to us, so please add your name to that list. Thank you very much. Okay. So that's Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission. Now I want to launch into, who are the homeless? We see them. We may even know them. But oftentimes the picture to us is still kind of faded. It's black and white. We don't quite understand how to approach them, what to do with the encampments, that sort of thing. And so here's a little video. If I can get it work. There it is. You see that? Work. How about we skip that one? Okay. You probably have seen the YouTube videos as well. That was a little YouTube video produced basically to deliver the message that, you know what? The homeless are all human. The homeless are you and I. Standing before you, I've been homeless twice in my life. 1 year ago, before I took this position, I was homeless. I was working in Fort Lauderdale. I lost my job as a recent divorcee. My landlord evicted me on May 1st of 2018. But for the grace of God, and 1,400 miles to pack up my belongings in my car to drive to Rockford, Illinois, pull into the driveway of my parents that I hadn't lived with in 26 years. For 8 months last year, until I landed in Philadelphia at the Sunday Breakfast Rescue Mission, I was homeless. Now what's the difference between me and perhaps even most of you and most of the men and women that we serve every day? What's the difference? I had a safety net. It's called my parents. Even with 2 master's degrees and, quite frankly, in an executive white-collar job, I had the safety net. So as even I sit with men every single day and say, so there's no difference between you and me. Absolutely none. We are only human. We all know all the statistics that most of us and most of Americans are only but 1 paycheck away from ourselves, finding ourselves in a car, sleeping on a couch. First time that I was homeless, Boston, Massachusetts, I slept on a futon in my church for 5 months because paid youth pastor typically is an oxymoron. And I had a calling to ministry, and I slept in my car. I bummed showers off of friends. I would live with the disdain because many thought that there was something wrong with me, that in Boston, Massachusetts, I couldn't find a place to afford to live. What does that look like for Cape May County? If you have your smartphone, I want you to get out your phone, and I want you to look at this website. It's simply reports.nlih.org/OOR. Again, if you can't read that, it's reports.nlihc, which stands for the National Low Income Housing Coalition.org/OOR. If I had a little bit more time, I would break down exactly what that looks like for Cape May, but I want to give that resource for you. What it does is it takes what the median income in Cape May is, and it breaks down what it requires for somebody to afford to live here. It spells out what the median rent is for a studio apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, and it shows that the bulk of even perhaps you here in this room, in terms of the professions that you are in or that you represent, you can't afford to live here. And so that's what we're talking about as it relates to the homeless here in Cape May County. Another statistics that I want to be able to just kind of share with you nationally, this is kind of what we're seeing as well, is that the federal poverty line is getting farther and farther even from the median family income. Now looking at this room, I can see that many of you were born, or at least you were alive in 1973. This is just a simple graphic that demonstrates that the reality, the economic realities that you grew up with as a family no longer exist for many of the families. The top blue line is the median family income for a family of 4. That's the median income for a family of 4. What does that look like for Cape May County? That's $65,500. That is the median income for a family of 4 in Cape May County. But the difference is that the federal poverty line, in which the federal government and other such programs define who deserves subsidies and benefits and assistance, has not equally risen with that median line. And so what happens is between that gap, as we define who are the poor, if you make even between that, federal government and other programs say, nope, you're not poor. So the collective benefit, or actually the collective harm in all of that, just math. Again, I have an MBA, so I try to keep these things simple. Oftentimes it's arithmetic and math that people can't afford because they don't make enough. That therefore, even in that, as a society, as a country, as a community, as a city, as a municipality, therefore, those families in between aren't even counted. And they're not even eligible. Yet those are the families that can't afford to live in our communities. So further, when we talk about the homeless, I want you to take a look at this video.
My sister and her family have lived in New York for like 8 years now. She took care of me when I was a little kid because my parents were working. Every Sunday I cook, and so my uncle calls me and he'll be like, hey, what you making?
I'm putting me some bars anymore, but I met my wife in a bar and 3 or 4 years later, still working. My grandma had a lot of costumes from the theater that she started, where kids would dress up in those costumes and we'd put on little sketches for family.
My whole life, I've always felt like we were like a team, my brother and I. I think there's nobody who can understand you quite like your family.
That's my cousin.
That's really weird.
I know she's not homeless because I just hung out with her a couple weeks ago, but I mean, I did not know that person when I was walking by was her.
You know, things are a lot more real than you expect, so.
good one, isn't it? That was, of course, produced by our friends at the New York City Rescue Mission. That was a social experiment that they started with a website that raises now a ton of money amongst corporations and people in Manhattan. But the truth is, I think you got the truth. The homeless to us often are invisible. They're invisible to us because we don't see them as our families. We don't see them as God's children. It's easy for us to put a distance between us and them. So I just posed this question to you. Why are they often invisible, even in your walk of life? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I gave you one answer. Well, why else? Here in Cape May County, why are the homeless often invisible? Somebody. Yes.
This is a big tourist town. People don't want to acknowledge that they're homeless people, they want to look away. They think they're all vagrants and talk to themselves and they think down here they're pretty low, Jersey Shore, and many people don't realize who's mental health component to this.
Right.
It's almost like, well, look at the situation they got themselves in. Our taxpayers are going to pay all this money to get them out of this.
Right.
That's
Wayne? Why else? Why are they invisible? Yes, sir.
It's easier for most people to not see them.
It's easier. Who wants to stop and interrupt our lives? We're so busy people. That's some of it, right? It's easy. Why else? Why are they invisible?
You have a sense of helplessness
Yes.
that if I did stuff, I wouldn't know what to do.
Yes. Yes. Okay, good. I like that. I like that. Yes.
Well, they're no longer invisible to me because I work with them. But before that, they were invisible because I was too busy in my life.
Too busy in your life. Yeah. Shore community. A lot. That's a common thing. But why else? Somebody else. Because they can look like everyone else. It's tough to even know what they look like, right? Yes.
Fear.
Fear. Yeah. Fear. Yeah, one more. Yeah.
And embarrassment. Some people always come to feel the acknowledge that they're talking to somebody that's lower than them.
Embarrassment. That's such a good one. One of the things that we're learning, and I forgot to say this earlier, honestly, I'm not an expert. I'm still a student. Every day I'm a student. But one of the reasons why, what we're learning of why they're invisible to us is the complexity of what they deal with because of the trauma that they've experienced in their life. And so more and more in homeless services, especially amongst gospel rescue missions, our entire modality and the entire way that we approach how to work with the homeless is what's called the trauma-informed care model. And so the simple question is, why talk about the impact of trauma in relation to homeless outreach and or service delivery? And what I'm going to share with you, because we couldn't be here, is actually some fresh material compiled by our friends at the Bowery Rescue Mission. They are the nation's oldest rescue mission. If you know Manhattan, you know the Bowery. They are the kingpins and a gospel rescue mission in Manhattan. And so some of the stuff, the materials that they put together is just even research like this. Read this with me. A traumatic event can shatter a person's sense of safety, meaning, and connection with the world. For those of us that do see the homeless, doesn't that match? There's like a disconnection with reality. And oftentimes, we don't even necessarily know if they know what reality or what planet this is. Here's another significant quote that we look to. The impact of the traumatic stress can be devastating and long-lasting interfering with a person's sense of safety, the ability to self-regulate their life, a sense of self, a perception of control and self-efficacy, and interpersonal relationships. So this is what trauma in the homeless population, and Denise, you already really nailed this one earlier. As it relates to women, over 90% of homeless mothers report having experienced severe physical or sexual assault during their lifetimes. Over 90%, more than 70% of homeless mothers have at least one childhood risk factor. So when you look into the psychological effects of trauma and how it leads into homelessness, it's what's called childhood risk factors, and that can include physical abuse, or they ran away, or living in foster care. I didn't say that about me, but I grew up in foster care. Over 100 brothers and sisters from moi. So as a man, more than a quarter of homeless men were assaulted just in the last year. And despite the fact that men comprise the majority of homeless people and are frequently exposed to trauma, homeless men are less likely to go and get help and to be able to receive some of the services that homeless women do. And then, of course, this is with a lot of intensive effort and outreach to them. What does it look like for youth? 86% of homeless youth report extreme exposure to trauma. And we do know that amongst our youth is the LGBTQI population. 1/3 have been assaulted. 40 to 60% cite physical abuse as the reason for leaving their home. And 33% said that they have been physically or sexually assaulted just in the last year. So this is trauma. Again, I lived in New Jersey for 16 years. I was outside Manhattan when 9/11 hit, and as you know, that's trauma. Aaron being from Michigan, I can say all my family being in Illinois, you mentioned 9/11 and it goes over their head. But for those of us in this region, you say 9/11, I mean, right? We just commemorated it this past week. I mean, the hair goes up on the back of our head and it just brings and sucks us there. That's the same effect that those who have these occurrences go through. And so here's a very simple message to the churches, if you represent a church, is that traumatic stress can deeply influence our guests and clients' even ability to be able to hear and respond to the hope of the gospel. And why is that? It's because this is how trauma is even defined, according to the American Psychological Association. Trauma is an emotional response to just a terrible event, as I just said, like in 9/11, but an event like an accident, a rape, a natural disaster. And immediately after the event, shock and denial are very typical. It's the fight, flight, or freeze aspect of trauma in which it sits with them unless it's been dealt with. And longer term effects include unpredictable emotions, a flashback, physical symptoms like headache, nausea, all of those things. So oftentimes the homeless that we work with, we see it every single day. We see this avoidance. That's why in many cases we have the encampments, even in a Cape May County. It's an avoidance, an escape. They don't want to deal with the thing that happened to them last year, 10 years ago when they were a child. They don't want to deal with it. And of course, that whole re-experiencing aspect, especially when they get into trusting, loving relationships. Those of you who work with very troubled individuals, you know the sabotage effort that you always deal with, that they just want to ruin it because that trauma is being re-experienced. And because again, oftentimes love can be painful. They don't know how to take it. It can re-traumatize them. There can be an arousal and all this sort of thing. So oftentimes in our chapel services, we have the hellfire and brimstone preachers that come in, and it is absolutely the worst tone to our homeless men and women to be able to go through that. And we say to our preachers and our chapel speakers, do that in your church that works with your community that doesn't work with ours. Because there's this little thing that we've become aware of, which is called the window of tolerance. And if you've ever worked with the homeless or people in social need, you know that oftentimes they're up in this hyper-arousal period. And the window of tolerance just basically see that you and I, even tonight, you're in that window of tolerance, hopefully, to be able to learn something, to be able to pick up on something, to absorb what I have. You're able to think, feel. But if you walked in here tonight and you hadn't had a meal for a week, or a shower for a month, either you're coming in super high arousal, hyper arousal, man, it's the fight, flight, or freeze, don't touch me, I'm going to pop your head out. Or oftentimes what we see is the hypo arousal. It's that window of tolerance where they shut down. They become numb, flat. You ever see somebody homeless? That's why. What's wrong with that dude? Well, go without a few days of meals, and it's that hypoarousal. And oftentimes what happens is with that numbing, they don't even know how to say no. Hey, can I get you something? They don't want it, but they don't even know how to say no. It's yes, sure. So Scripture even gives us some instruction as it relates to how we view these things. We know Jesus had compassion when he looked upon them. They were a sheep without a shepherd. In Matthew, and this is where we've moved into the modality of the spaces and the environment that we try to create, is an opportunity for them to be able to come in and have rest. Because we want Jesus ultimately to be the one to say, come to me, I will give you rest. And you will find rest for your souls. And so think about your church, think about your agency, your workplace, or in whatever context that you want to be more embracing in accommodating the homeless. Are you creating space, not just physical space, but even a time space for them to come in and rest? Because they're weary. And that gives them even time to absorb the gospel, to absorb what the Spirit may even be able to be speaking to them. Finally, in 1 Thessalonians, it's a very strong word from Paul that I think applies to our work with the homeless, is, I urge you, brothers and sisters, admonish, encourage, help, be patient with all of them. And so what does trauma-informed care as it relates to us as a ministry and perhaps for you and your church? It's doing everything with the recognition that our guests and clients likely embody many aspects, if not all aspects, of traumatic stress. And that we are being intentional when we call churches and we're asking churches and chapel speakers to be intentional about crafting interactions and experiences for them to be able to encounter relationships. And first, what's the ultimate relationship we want them to encounter? God, through his Son, Jesus Christ. But to craft these experiences that, of course, are not going to trigger stress, but that are going to be very appropriate to the different levels that they may be experiencing walking into our doors. So in addition to this, just tips. Here are the 4 R's as it relates to trauma-informed means, that a program, organization, a system that is trauma-informed usually has these things. First of all, recognize the widespread aspect of it. To realize and recognize even the symptoms so you can see it and understand that person is not just really ticked off. Perhaps they're hypersensitive. We need to just step back, de-escalate, let them chill out, give them some space. Then to respond with integrating the knowledge about trauma into your policies, your procedures, your approaches, the way your greeters, the way your ushers, and all those people that surround your experiences interact. And then lastly, completely resist any way of trying to re-traumatize them. So that's where we've kind of led our model, and we are trying to change our culture. It's a culture of how we do everything, even from the top of my board of directors to our staff, hiring new staff, doing all things we can do to change our language, our behaviors, our policies into consideration to be able to make the guest, our homeless guest, that person the absolute central of everything that we do. And a lot of this, and you've probably seen this, that of course is informing how we are responding to people, is just the traditional classic Maslow hierarchy of needs. Many of you have seen this, right? is that many of them come to us, of course, way down here. You know, there's the psychological effect that they don't even have as it relates to breathing oftentimes. There's the medical aspect, food, water, and of course safety. We're always trying to structure aspects of our safety. We are in Center City, Philadelphia. Essentially, at what time was Skid Row, 13th and Vine. And so we got a very hard element. So as you can imagine, when they come into our building, we want them to have a sense of safety. So next, just to share with you, that's why in our mission, we've really considered that everybody who has experienced homelessness, of course, has experienced trauma. And the homelessness, of course, is a result, oftentimes, of those triggered traumas. And so I want you to take a look at this next video as you think about how you want to relate and how you want to approach the homeless. This next video you'll see is not produced by a Christian group, but when you see the logo at the bottom, they even as a national company stop to consider who are the people who come into our doors. Check this out. So in the daily work that Erin does, Director of Homeless Services, she works any particular day with between 30 to 50 unique homeless men a day. The number one thing she asks them is, hey man, what's your story? I pass that on to you because if there's one thing that I would love for you to be able to learn about interacting and engage with anyone that's homeless, it's just that simple question. Trauma-informed care can even be summarized in this way. Instead of looking at somebody about what's wrong with them, instead of looking at somebody and saying, hey, what's wrong with you? It reverses the question and say, whoa, what happened to you? No one grows up saying, hey, I want to be homeless. Anybody here? Raise your hand. No? Oh, come on. Where's those college degrees for? I mean, isn't that what we aspire to be homeless? Instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you? What brought you here? And how can I help you? So to move forward, I mean, it's a very simple act to be able to just build trust with somebody. This is not a one-term fix. This is not even a Band-Aid you're going to throw onto something. And that's hopefully the biggest message that you're getting tonight too, is that if you want to work with the homeless, it's not just a one-night outreach with your church to deliver some sandwiches and say, God bless you. I mean, it takes a relationship, and I love what the pastor says, that even this church is about Christ, compassion, and community. Guess what? You know what the homeless need? All three of those. Community, compassion, and Christ. And so a person's story must be known in order for us to be able to get into that. So this is oftentimes what the typical experience looks like when we work with somebody that's homeless. Is first of all, for you to understand, be so careful not to overpromise. What happens is what's called the expectation to alienation paradigm, that they come in, they have an expectation. Why? Because we love them and we're Christ Church. Man, God loves you. Why don't you come in for a hot cup of coffee? So they have this expectation. And immediately, it's as if they went to the dentist with a toothache. And they know that the dentist is a Christian. And the dentist is so compassionate and loving and full of Christ that they sit down in that chair and the dentist say, hey, what brought you in today? And they say, well, poof. And the dentist say, but I tell you what, before I do so, Jesus loves you. Can I pray with you? Okay. And at the end, about the hour when the dentist even got a meal, the dentist say, hey, great, see you next time. And the person walks out and says, that ain't no dentist. He didn't even fix my tooth. And oftentimes as Christians, as churches, that's what happens. There's an absolute disappointment that comes with that. And then we've seen, maybe you've even seen that, the anger and the hurt and the resentment, the bitterness. And that's what oftentimes, can I say, drives them into encampments in their own community, because those people, that system, that office, that agency can't be trusted. Because I thought that when I walked in, they said that they're going to help and heal me and help me with my wounds. Great. They prayed with me. I believe in Jesus, but I still got this toothache. I mean, how many of us would go back to the dentist if we never got a tooth pulled every now and then? Anybody? And yet even the work that we do with the homeless is even as much as a skilled craft and expertise that a dentist or a doctor has. And so this is what's called the expectation to alienation paradigm. And we're going to skip this tonight for this was going to put my Vanna White right over here, aka Aaron, but we have this really cool exercise that we're going to skip tonight. And it simply is just called musical chairs. And usually we bring people up to read 7 different scenarios of what somebody's experiencing, and we only have 2 chairs up here. And so oftentimes we say, hey, you're safe, come in tonight, but the reality is of the 7 that in administrative homeless programs like her, or perhaps you as a church, are struggling with, you got 7 people, but only 2 chairs, only 2 beds, only 2 vouchers, only 2 moments of assistance, because there's never enough to go around. And the whole point of that is for you to have visually been able to see, as a takeaway, is to be compassionate and to assist. You have to know who your players are, and you have to know how to play the game and not overpromise that just because they come in to be able to seek assistance, that their whole world's problems are going to go away. And see, if I can just say, I'm a Reverend, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, forgive me for those who have been to seminary, but we Christians are really good at that. Give your life and heart to Jesus and all your problems will go away. I know mine have. I've been following Jesus since I was in high school, but And so in this work, and I know time's getting on, how are we doing on time? Good? Okay, I'm going to try to end here at 8:30 because this is so important. What I want you to realize is that there's a great book called When Helping Hurts. And if there's only one book you're going to read on the subject, it's this one right here. There's a great small group study about it. And there's some awesome precepts and concepts that have been learned in third world countries on how to help the poor in terms of who poverty is. And so when you ask the question, how should we help as a community? How should we unite, as the pastor said, to be able to bring people together? It's recognizing this simple thing, that there's a big difference between relief, rehabilitation, and development. And then basically it's broken like this, that we broke down who this person is, right? Trauma. Something happened. We need to learn the story. And oftentimes there is the crisis, natural disaster. She mentioned one earlier. She was raped under the boardwalk. There's a crisis. But too many times, even in this mode, they come to us seeking relief when there really hasn't been the crisis. And so as Christians, especially churches, we become really good at only focusing on the relief aspect of what the individual needs. And we ignore, or perhaps don't realize, that where they're really at is over here in rehabilitation and development, and even our act of compassionate, charitable handouts, thinking that this isn't a crisis, we need to give that out to them. We are stunting their growth to rehabilitate, to re-enter, to come into society, or even in their development, and we keep them dependent and stuck in the relief mode. Does any of that make sense to you?
Yes.
And so to be able to simply break it down into, again, in terms of what the difference between relief, rehabilitation, and development is, relief just as that. It's the urgent. It's the temporary. Charity's good. Handouts aren't necessary. I do them almost every single day. But rehabilitation seeks to restore people and their communities to the positive elements of their pre-crisis conditions. When again, most aren't in crisis. And then development is the process of the ongoing change. Perhaps for many of them, especially if they're recovering addicts, it's a whole life process, right? Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's a lifetime process of both the helpers and the helped. Takes both in the development to get closer to being in right relationship with God, self, others, and the rest of creation. It's kind of, think of it this way. Again, I use the dentist one. It's like you go into the doctor and you say, "Doctor, I have a headache." And the doctor says, "Oh, okay, here's an aspirin." You take that aspirin, you go back the next day, "Doctor, I still have a headache." "Oh, okay, here's an aspirin." After a while, we think that the aspirin is really going to fix the brain tumor. Because we fail to recognize that as the doctor, those that are helping, that what we were giving out and handing out and doling out wasn't really even solving the root problem. And so we get stuck and we get proud. Hey, we distribute this many bags of clothes and this, all that sort of thing. Again, I do that every single day as well. But as a community, for you to think about that there is a huge difference between relief, rehabilitation, and development. This is the biggest quote of this book. Is that one of the biggest mistakes that North American churches make, by far, is in applying relief in situations in which rehabilitation or development is the appropriate intervention. When I was in Westfield, New Jersey, as a pastor, one of the first lessons I learned about this was we were on the train line from Manhattan, on the railroad train line, right? And so I had somebody sit in my office that needed some money for a baby formula. I had a very healthy budget, being a resourced, affluent First Baptist Church of Westfield, to help such individuals, right? It felt good. So while the person was sitting in my office, I get a phone call. First phone call, I hadn't met him yet, from Deacon Tom Pluta of Holy Trinity Roman Catholic Church. He said, "Hi, I'm Deacon Tom. I just want to know, do you have a young lady sitting in your office?" I said, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And he says, "Do you realize You're now the seventh church she visited. And I said, oh, really? I just heard this fantastic story of the crisis in her life, and I was going to save her because her baby can't die. And he says, listen, welcome to Westfield, New Jersey. Just so you know, that's why we have the Westfield Mountainside Ministerium, because when they first come into our office, we call each other to make sure that they're not doing the rounds. So there again, that was an example of, though, man, I was sucked in. It was a crisis. We can't have the baby go without formula that night, right? But it really allowed that woman to be reliant, dependable, and, frankly, manipulate a system in order to get baby formula. And so this book, I think, in a very brutal way, spells effective relief. SELDOM. Frankly, the crisis, every day, the men that come into us, every day, it's a crisis. Oh my God, I gotta have this. No, it's that hyper, right? Or the hypo. It's not a crisis, but good, effective relief is seldom, it's immediate, and it needs to be temporary. So the next aspect of what we're learning along these lines, I have multiple slides there. Oh, there you go. Is, I'm getting close to end, is basically then ensuring that what we do in terms of our approach and is evaluating and assessing is what we want to do to the poor, is what we want to do for the poor, or is what we want to do with the poor. Moving our approach from a relief, and you can see the rehabilitation and the development in terms of everything we do, of the difference between to, for, and with. And so what this looks like is, and the book kind of breaks it down, is what's called a participatory approach. And think about even what you are involved with now or you want to do. That doing to the poor, doing to somebody that hope, oftentimes has a coercive element. That unless they do this, right, or receive this, and they submit to our predetermined plans developed by others, then they're not going to be able to get our help. The next continuum, and hopefully we're not coercing people, is compliance. We're going to do it for them. Hey, if you show up at the bus station at this particular time, I will help you by transporting you. Yes?
I have a question.
Yes.
Question.
Is this the only question?
The question from the audience
Yes.
is, so how do you go from a relief to rehabilitation to development? And
Grab your microphone.
okay.
Now I'm putting her on the spot because now you can see why the question was going to her. I did tell you she was the expert, right? Yes. It should be.
Okay. So it's not a tiered process from relief to rehabilitation to development. It's kind of an and/or thing. Relief is just a temporary thing. What we really want to do for the individuals we are serving is walk alongside them, get to the root cause of the problem, what brought them here, what led them here, and then in walking alongside them, being a mentor, providing spiritual guidance, and in doing that, we are rehabilitating the root cause of what brought them to homelessness in the first place. And when they get that rehabilitation, then they can fully develop and become productive members of society.
So what we see in Philadelphia a lot, what she does, Luis, Hispanic, Spanish-speaking man in the 70s, daily occurrence, we have the homeless being dropped off by emergency rooms because they're senior citizens, they have nowhere place to go. This individual had no clothes on but his hospital gowns. We see that almost every day. And he didn't speak English. We got some translation services, and lo and behold, while he was sick and he was in his hospital, his eldest son, who he was living with, didn't want him to come back home. So what do we do with Luis? Number one, is that a crisis? He has nowhere to go. He just got kicked out of the hospital, discharged, excuse me, from the hospital. We gave him clothes, we gave him the 30-day shelter, right? Next, what did we do?
Oh my goodness, okay, forgive me if I forget this one. I served probably 30 to 50 men a day, wasn't me too.
Okay, so while he was staying with us, we helped him be able to get back in touch with Social Security, be able to ensure that his benefits was being returned to him. He had a little bit of income. We found a daughter that was able to be able to take him back in. But you can see that's a difference between, that basically is a progression from relief. Sir, what's your story? I couldn't understand him, it was in Spanish, right? Okay, through translation services, dealt with him. He completely lost his wallet. He was from Cuba. He had an amazing story in which he escaped and he was in the military, and anything you know about that. It was fantastic stories we heard from this dude. But he lost his wallet in the process and he didn't know how to get in touch with, be able to get his income, and we were able to be able to help him. That was the rehabilitative piece. And then the development piece was being able to get him back into a stable environment in reconciliation with his family. Okay, so that's a good question.
Great question. So it wasn't just about providing them relief. He had many barriers to overcome to get to a point of stability and rehabilitation and development in his life.
And so the difference even in that situation of the doing with was his cooperation. Is that he was living with the oldest son out of coercion from the rest of the family, and his compliance. He got sick, went into the hospital, and that became an aspect of his cooperation, in which we worked with him with this plan, and to be able to reach out to the daughter and work up a plan as it relates to the co-learning. Oh my gosh, the stories that this guy had, to be able to help him all along the life that of course he now deserves in his aging years. And the last step in this whole continuum, which frankly, if you know anybody who truly has accomplished this, we haven't, I haven't, hey, have them next time to be your keynote speaker, is ultimately we want to get to the spot where we're responding to the homeless. We're responding to the poor. We're responding to them because they themselves are setting their own agenda and mobilizing to carry it out. So this is my last slide. Are you ready? So here's the questions for you. What are your next steps? Everything that you heard, are there certain things that you say, whoa, I never really thought about that before? Oh my goodness, perhaps what we are doing as a church, we got to stop and consider how to go about that. And so there's some simple questions that I would ask you to think about in all of your efforts and all of your ways that you want to be able to work with and help the homeless. And the first one, again, frankly, this again, it comes right out of this book. So I'm not plagiarizing. With whom did you plan to speak in determining whether or not to do this project, outreach, or effort? With whom? As Christians, we believe in the kingdom of God, the body of Christ. No church, in my opinion, should be working in isolation or alone from other efforts of churches in this community, in this country. So with whom have you already talked about and speak with in determining whether or not you should start something, do something, be part of? The next question for you to think about is, does the design of your project, your outreach, your service effort, do they reflect the things that are to, for, with the homeless? We broke it down a little bit earlier. What do they reflect? Is it doing to, coercive compliance, for, with, co-learning? What does it reflect, the thing that you want to do? Next, where would your approach then fall in the categories of participation just described? How does empowerment fit in as it relates to the efforts and the service and the projects that you want to do? And this is the last question just for you to think about, is how could you have been selected, designed, executed, and even evaluated what your dream idea or project is in a more participatory manner? Because helping can't hurt. Many of us are not the dentists or the medical students of the homeless. There is a profession to it. It doesn't stop what you do, and frankly, the illustration earlier before, when we have 7 people up here and you've got to choose who's got to sit in the chair, that's the value of everything you do, because this mayor and these freeholders don't have enough resources to serve everyone. Here's a simple statistic in the city of Philadelphia. On any given night, there are 3,400 homeless men, single homeless men in the city of Philadelphia. Every night. There's only 1,700 homeless beds. Even if every attic and every one on opioid in Kensington, at the corner of Kensington, said, I want to come in, we only have half the amount of beds. And I would venture to say the municipalities have that too. So what you are doing, you are a player. You are a player, and it's absolutely effective. And so whatever you do, I would end, of course, just with this admonition, is the scripture was read earlier, do it in all excellence, absolutely to the best. I say to myself, don't do things because the CEO walks in. That will damn you to hell. According to Jesus' words, do it because those that come in that are hungry and hurting and ugly and angry and sometimes lovely, because you're doing it as if they are Jesus himself, not because the CEO is around or some other elected official. And so same thing with you. Whatever you do, work heartily, Scripture says, Paul in Colossians, as for the Lord and not for men, not for awards. I don't get any awards for this. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, because you are ultimately serving Lord Jesus Christ and our Father and God in heaven. Amen? Amen. Okay. Question?
I do have another question. It says, do you have an automated system to track the homeless people you help? Is it shared or used by the agencies, private or public? So we do have a database right now that we only use for our agency. We take case notes. So when the person is sitting down next to us, we can relive the story with them and identify with them and relate to them in a way that's caring and a way that they feel heard and a way that they know they have a voice. So often people come to me and say, thank you. Thank you for giving me a voice. Thank you for hearing me. And so I come from the bureaucratic side of things. I work for a community action agency. We were entirely funded by the government, and it became very frustrating work to me because everything became so data-driven and less about people that we served. So it's a great, great gift for me to be able to go into a rescue mission and do work and walk alongside these men and get to know them. And that is what you all really need to recognize, the importance and value of the work that you're doing. They are not just a statistic, they are not just data, they are human beings that need to be heard and need to have a voice. And just commend yourself for being here.
Awesome. Was there other questions?
Any other questions?
Okay, so that means you left your cell phone at home and you couldn't text her. Were there any questions that you wrote down for her? Okay, so we'll field a couple questions if you just want to raise your hand. Is that? What do we have on speaker? Okay, I'm gonna sit down.
Maybe they can speak with you after.
Awesome. You can speak with me after. Thank you. God bless you.
Help. Hey. All right. You know, it's interesting, Jeremy said there about everybody having a story. And in the winter, actually between January 10th and March 8th, we manned a warming center 29 different times. That was included staying overnight. Denise and I were the only volunteers who would do that. We stayed overnight. A lot of people are afraid to stay with the homeless. And we had one guy there, and he was an alcoholic. I know because he told me I'm an alcoholic. And I heard his story a little bit later, and someone had told me that he had been in prison for murder. And I did get a chance to talk to him a little bit, and I didn't cry. But it turns out his offense was committed when he was 16 years old. And his victim had raped his grandmother. And I would like to ask a question, you know, all of the men in the room, you were 16. If someone raped your grandmother and you had the opportunity to take action, would you have done it? You know, would you have done it? For this, the guy had to pay a very severe price. He was released to homelessness and alcoholism. Now, I still remember one night when he came to me with a Monopoly game. And he wanted to play Monopoly. And I said, man, that game takes like 12 hours. But we played Monopoly, and I cheated to speed up the game. But that's all the guy wanted to do. He wasn't there looking for trouble. He wasn't there to be a danger. He just wanted some companionship. And hopefully we gave him a little compassion and companionship, and a little bit of Christ too. Okay. We do want to bring up Pastor Alfred DeMayo. Today, to talk about his organization.
A couple weeks ago, we were going to Walmart, and I was blessed to meet Denise, and that's when she told me about this night, and a couple days later, she asked me to come and speak. I know you guys have been here for a while, so I'm not going to be long. The first thing I want to say is, I love your heart. I love your hearts. Brother Jeremy, hearing all these things that you guys are doing, it just touches me. Seeing those videos have touched me. 4 years ago, I've been homeless in my life. I was addicted to drugs. I'm from South Jersey. The help that I needed, I couldn't find here. I eventually had to leave the state. I went to Maine. I went to a Bible-based program. I gave my heart to the Lord. And while I was there, I realized something. My whole life, I worked for me to get ahead and to do things. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to just help the community I was in. Because when I walked in, I was loved. I was showed respect and honor. And people loved me back into the right mentality. And it's funny, Jeremy, listening to you, homeless people are people. And I think a lot of us, if the wrong things happen to us, again, Jeremy, the story that you had, if the wrong thing happens to us, I just got mad at everything. I left everything last year to come back to New Jersey. If something happened to me, I could be homeless. And the reality is, I think it's more common than people think. And not all of us have that safe zone for those people. And I think the community working together is the answer. It's not religious. It's not just religious organizations. It's not just the government. It's not just nonprofits. It's normal people, like most of you in this room, that come together and work together to give back to a community. I've never looked so much into homelessness. You have to understand, when I left the state, I was addicted to drugs. Okay, that's why I had to leave. That's why I had to get help. But when I went to Bible college, I started working with a ministry that did outreaches all over the country. We had 25 recovery homes. We had a home in Tijuana, Mexico, a safe house. Some of the stories that I've heard, it is unbelievable. Some of the things that people, like you and me, have gone through. I'm sure there might even be some stories here. Not everybody is strong enough in their minds to get past things. Some people, they lose it. They lose reality. And we need to work together to maybe see these things through. So anyway, I'm working in Maine in a ministry. I was eventually asked to go to LA. I was in Skid Row. If you guys have never been there, words can't even describe the craziness of that, living in LA, California. Homelessness is a huge problem. Coming back here, you see, I never wanted to come back here to New Jersey, but I got so many phone calls last year. so many phone calls, so many people hurt and broken in my community. I grew up in Miami, New Jersey. And I decided to come back. There were 3 of us praying in the back of a barbershop last year around this time. We now have a men's home. We have a women's home. We have a thrift store. Some of our women are here with us today. There's a few that aren't. Our men's home is a home. There was a men's night tonight, so I kept them there. And I just want to say that if anyone wants information about what we're doing, we have a little table set up over there with some information. My cell phone's there. My cell phone number's there. We have a 188 number for anyone that might be struggling with something. They want to come in. We don't just minister to homeless people. We minister to people that are addicted to drugs. We minister to people that have life-controlling issues. We actually minister to people that just don't have anything going on. They just want to get their life together. See, I know and I understand that the gospel of Jesus Christ saves people. I also know that that's not always the answer, right? So again, as a community, coming together and doing what we can to do to help these people, that's the key to everything. With that being said, like I said, I wasn't going to take up too much time. If anyone wants information, wants to know how they can help some people in this community, all you have to do is give me a call. I have homes here in Cumberland County. I have sister homes in Maine, and I have sister homes in Maryland. So we have beds open, so there's definitely help. That's what I'm doing to get back. Thank you.
So the book of James says to be doers of the word, not just hearers only. And those are all reason for calling this seminar tonight, is we wanted you to hear from people who have been doing things. I mean, we've been talking about taking this, our efforts in Cambridge County to the next level. And you heard a couple of people. And, I felt bad because 2 of our speakers weren't able to make it, but I don't think we lost anything. Right? You want to give us a benediction and release us to refreshments? I saw the refreshments, and a few people don't save me a chocolate chip cookie. No.
I must confess, I sampled a few of them. It's all good. And they replenished them. They came in.
You ate that
I like
many,
cooking.
you had to replace them.
Couldn't resist. Anyway, forgive me. Well, let's give thanks to the Lord. Thank you, pastors, for coming. Thank you for sharing. Man, I'll tell you what, that was very impressed, brother. Man, you were on point tonight. Thank you. Okay. That was very impressive. Great testimony. I look forward to having lunch. But let's give thanks this evening, please, man. And thank you for coming out and being part of this conversation. And I don't think it has to end tonight, does it?
No, sir.
Oh. Let's keep the conversation going. So let's go. Father God, we thank you this evening. I thank you for the power of the testimony and the blood of the Lamb. Power of that, Father, you said that's how Lord would come. And so, Father, I just pray that we would, as my brother highlighted, James commanded, that we would not only be the hearers but the doers. So, Lord, strengthen us for the task ahead. Help us with wisdom, Father. It says that we can seek you and that you would give us knowledge. So, Lord, help us seek you earnestly. And, Lord, let us be obedient. Lord, we seek you. We hear you. Let us be obedient. And then, Father, I've learned in my spiritual journey, sometimes when situations haven't changed, we just need to start praising you, giving thanks, because you're important. And so, Father, it's with hope and certainty that you will gain the victory in all these things. But, Father, help us today be the hands and feet of your Son, Jesus. And so it's in his name we pray. Amen. Amen. There's snacks in the back room. Please keep the conversation. We have a lot of snacks. Please go.